Hey guys, Jay here. Welcome to Eons of Battle. In this video, I want to breathe new life back into my Forge World Tombstalkers, my first ever Forge World models, and stick around till the end to see a montage of finished models courtesy of the EOB Complete community. These two Tombstalkers I bought back in high school, and what an exciting time that was. I'll always remember the magical day I received 2 big bags of models. And on a side note, what other company gets away with selling models by the bag? But anyway, I labored over these models, scouring the interwebs for any tips and hints I could find, as I did not want to screw them up. I washed these models in a popcorn bowl of soapy water as they were too big for anything else. Not only was this my first experience with Forge World resin, but it was my first experience with resin. I started in hard mode. I threw myself at these models. I cleared my painting schedule as I had never spent so much money all at once on models, and I was scared that if I did not just do it, I never would have the courage to paint them. Never feel that my skills matched how cool these models were. I cranked these out and was pretty happy with the results. I see now the error of my color selecting ways. These leggy boys suffered from the same fundamental flaw that all of my old Necrons suffered from. White, light blue, and gunmetal are not a very striking color combination, and made everything look rather bland. And it didn't help that they were on white snowy bases too. Big ol' but, if you saw our 10,000 point 1 week army painting challenge video here, you know that my Necrons have since gotten a sexy rework, and I will be painting these guys up to match. To fix my Tombstalkers and reanimate them in all their glory, I will be working in 4 parts. I have to rebuild or find some of the broken and missing parts. I have to fix up the paint job, taking what I did in high school and giving it the full might of my accumulated painting knowledge and experience. After that, I will be applying approximately 2.5 million decals, and finally building a pair of awesome bases that really help the models shine. These fellas are from Forge World, and for those of you who might not know, Forge World is a division of Games Workshop responsible for making compatible kits with games like 40k, Age of Sigmar, and Middle-earth. The Wikipedia page for Games Workshop explains Forge World as making complementary specialist resin miniatures and conversion kits. And that's a pretty good summary, but is it still true? Forge World is getting more and more expensive without getting more and more better. Games Workshop, love them or hate them, they are crushing it. New products most days it feels like, YouTube videos, product trailers, and new games. No matter how lukewarm you are on some new release, it's probably someone else's model of the year. Compared to that, Forge World is an interesting beast. You could say Forge World is where 40k goes to get weird with it, with models like the Necron Centipedes, Chaos Flying Shrimp, Eldar Ghost Soldiers, and Crude Dinosaurs. Forge World has been supplying 40k with weird and wacky for a while now, but maybe its glory days are behind it. With models being released with no warning, and more frequently being discontinued with no warning, questionable rules that make them unfriendly to play, and no real synergy with the 40k codexes, and on top of all that, kits getting a 15 to 20% markup here in the States, I feel like Forge World has lost its charm. And they don't even corner the market with oddities anymore. Games Workshop is getting in on the weird and wacky models lately with the Da Vincian flying machines, robot cowboys, flamethrower floating pulpits, and this. It seems like Forge World is losing what little ground it had, and I assume its days are numbered. But that's enough talk of the why of these models. Now it's time to talk about the how to paint of these models. The first step in getting my Tomb Spiders ready to rock and roll is to fix any parts that are broken or missing. Unfortunately, a couple of parts are missing, but luckily I am a hoarder, so I have all the extra bits that I was given back when I originally bought them. There are some things though, like this guy's antenna I am missing, and this little fella, don't break, there we go, is missing one of his butt pincers, so I'll have to build a new one of those. Can glue the old leg on, and boom. Oh, I should have cleaned the mold lines off of that before I glued it on. Now, time to work on number 2. Well, my stalkers are all cleaned up, and now it's time to fix the broken bits, or rather rebuild the broken bits. I think I'm going to do 2 antennas. I'm just gonna gut this one, and then I need to build a butt pincer. And I hope I have just the right plastic card. That ought to do it for the antenna. And then for the butt pincer, I need something kind of thick. Or do I glue 2 of these together? Well, I'll start with the antenna. All right, I want to build a new antenna, so I've got to get rid of the old antennas. So here we go. Yeah. 1, 2. This came off really easy. I thought that'd be a little bit more of a hassle. All right, time to rebuild the metaplastic. To make my antenna, I traced what I could of the forge roll antenna and drew on the rest with a pencil. I gave it my best guess as my forge rolled part was a twisted mess, but I carefully cut out my new antenna with many long shallow cuts of an X-Acto knife. Go slow. If you press too hard, you'll have a difficult time keeping your cut straight. I sanded the antenna smooth with my nail file working slowly. It would be so easy to put the pedal to the floor and bend the tiny piece of plastic, or worse yet, snap it. Now that I had one antenna, it was easy to make a second. I traced it and then performed all the same operations to cut it out and smooth it. I added some more plastic onto my antenna at the base. This added bulk will help give them a little more texture, some more tech gubbins. I trimmed it with my hobby nippers and used a knife and nail file to get it just right. I sanded the top smooth and then trimmed a bit of the antenna away to make it look like a long strand was coming out of a metal follicle. So now the only thing left is to build one butt pincer, and then these guys will be ready to repaint. To make the butt pincer, I did a very similar activity, tracing the shape off the forge rolled part that looked the best, then carefully cutting it out. It could be a good idea to make a few and then pick the best one, but I YOLO'd it. Once the shape was cut, I went in with a lot of filing, some dremeling and hobby knifing to get it ready for showtime. I pinned the puny pincer in place and had a complete model for the first time in years. The only thing left is a couple of antennae. Alright, gentle. The new antennae are amazing. And wow, what a difference having them actually complete and looking good. Ah, so excited. And I'm so glad the building is done. So now I get to do the fun part, which is painting. It is really interesting to look back and see all of the different things I did back in the day. It kind of brings me back to those moments when I was washing these in the sink, putting them all together, putting the paint on, trying out things with my old eBay airbrush. All those memories are coming back. With the models done, it was time to paint. I love painting so much, and it helps when the models are this cool. I'm gonna be painting these the same way I did my Necron Reanimator from Indomitus. And even though I'm painting white, I'm gonna be using black primer. Whew, this is the first paint going on there since high school. I'll forever be covering up my old paint job. But I think I can do better now. As of this moment, there's no going back. The Triwizard Tournament has begun. Wow, it's kind of trippy to see models that I've owned for pretty much my entire wargaming career now reprimed black. But they're ready for step 2, which is to bring them back up to white. And to do that, I'm gonna use some Formula P3, which is just gray, some Fenrisian gray, which is a light blue gray, and then some pure white. And that should make them shine. I have mostly given up priming models in any color other than black. I just find that it often is counterproductive. When I prime with white and gray, it just doesn't get the shadows and crevices as dark as I want them to be, and I hate to have to go back and darken them manually. It feels like a waste of time. So I've got my Tombstalkers base coated, and I want the carapace to be black. And I would hate to do it with a brush. It's one of my least favorite things to base coat with a brush. So since I've got it, I gotta airbrush. But I also don't want to mask the entire model. So it's time to airbrush. Now this technique would work with any card. Magic the Gathering, Star Wars collectible card game, Yu-Gi-Oh! Now if you use a limited edition or foil card, it will actually mask much better. But I'm just gonna use a common. This trick of using old Magic cards to mask areas worked a treat. It was a bit risky, for the card. Jokes aside, it was risky that I might miss and get paint somewhere that I didn't want it. But that was a risk I was willing to take. It let me work fast, especially on this model that would have been near impossible to mask with putty, tape, or masking fluid. And hopefully that saved me enough time so that I can now edge highlight every single one of these little carapaces. To give my Necrons an otherworldly glow, I like to edge highlight all the black armor with red trim, which I then further accent with orange and spots of yellow at each corner. What helps me edge highlight is a brush with long bristles. It holds more paint juice while giving me plenty of brush edge to run along my models. Well, I made some good progress on my tomb stalkers, and now I think they're going to need a stripe for me to put all my decals on. Now, on my old color scheme, I used silver, which didn't stand out that much from the white, but for this, I'm gonna be using some Vallejo liquid copper. It's really important to put a gloss coat or a matte varnish over your liquid golds because they're alcohol-based and they have real metal pigments. And I actually do have some models in the past that I applied this paint last so that it would still have the richest luster, but it actually has oxidized over time. So definitely need to put a varnish over this, but I'm gonna put a little of this on my model and it should look really striking. Really? Oh, come on now. Come on now. Really? There we go. There she goes. There. You're gonna want some alcohol, preferably 99%, but 91 I found gets the job done. And I like these hard palettes that have little round cups in them. So what I do is I fill up 1 cup and then I put a few drops in another one. Then I use a pipette to take the liquid copper out of the bottle. I never put a brush or anything in this because I don't want to expose the entire batch of paint to water or oxygen or anything that could hurt it. And then this is alcohol-based paint, so I find it really likes to wick in your paintbrush. So you want your decent but disposable synthetic. You'll probably get a few uses out of it, but it does tend to really do a number on brushes. So don't use your Kolinsky Sable brushes for this. So I'm painting stripes with this copper and I'm gonna get kind of one shot at it because it's gonna be annoying to fix it. So paint inside the lines, paint inside the lines. Do not screw up the copper color because it'll be a pain in the butt. Oop. Well, okay, well. That stripe's just gonna be a little fatter than the other ones. But I think I'm liking what this is doing. Especially once the decals are on there, I think this is gonna look tip-top. I always find that these Vallejo liquid gold paints are perfect one and dones, but are tricky to highlight further. I did my best by giving the top of each stripe a bit of silver in the middle, and on each panel I gave a blob of gold. This made the copper stripe a bit more interesting to look at. I think the copper turned out great, and I think the next step is going to be doing an oil wash. I slapped the oil onto the model and immediately thought to myself, oh no, this might have been a mistake. This model has so many little nooks and crannies. Not only did it take forever to brush the oil on, but the crazy number of legs made it near impossible to get the oil off. Well, it wouldn't be a painting project if something didn't go unexpected. The oil looks all right. I think the rough surface of the forge rolled resin, it's holding a little bit more wash than I would like it to, but it still looks all right. But I think on this second one, I'm gonna give it a bath of good old-fashioned Nuln oil, and we'll see which one looks better. My thought process was the Nuln oil was much lighter and would give me a less dramatic effect. It would not hide the subtle transitions I made for myself with the airbrush. But well, the oil and the Nuln oil are completely dry, and I don't know if either of them were particularly successful. The oil probably did a better job of washing, but unfortunately from handling it, getting my brush into every nook and cranny, the handling did force me to rub off a little bit of paint, which isn't catastrophic. It's a little disappointing, but I can always add more paint. It's hard to completely ruin a paint job. And then with the Nuln oil, it did not darken my model up as much, and I do kind of like how it turned out, but it's still gonna need a little bit of white highlighting to get it exactly where I wanted. And it left a couple of coffee stains on my carapace paneling. I think maybe a selective wash in each joint would have been the smartest thing to do, but too late now. But I can totally go in with some white paint and brighten everything right back up to where I want it to be. No harm done. I thinned down some white paint with a drop of matte medium and slowly brought back up my white Necron color scheme. Even though my wash was a bit of a step backward, it was a good learning experience. Washes work wonders on models that are nice and smooth, but can get trapped in all the wrong places on grainy models. Now back on track, I broke out the airbrush and red ink. I did a simple airbrush OSL object source lighting on all of the Necron glowy energy bits. Then I broke back out the Pokemon cards for one last masking job and gave all my Necron gas weapons a spatter painting of orange and yellow with the airbrush. Well, the paint job on these Tombstalkers is finally finished and they are looking spectacular. Now, before we deep dive on decals, I want to take a moment to talk about the EOB Patreon. If you enjoy our videos, the best way to support us is by becoming a member of our Patreon. Over there, you'll get access to some behind the scenes, voting on what models I paint live here on YouTube, extra live streams every week, and more. Now, let's tackle those troublesome decals. Decals are one of my all-time favorite hobby tools. They look great, they can save you hours and hours of freehanding, and they're super easy, but it's really easy to screw them up as well. Decals really are harder than they look. I have seen Games Workshop do a poor job of it. As you can see on this monolith, they look cloudy and bad. The artist either let the decal soak too long and the adhesive washed away, or the textured surface on the model let air get trapped underneath the plastic sheet of the decal. Decals may be challenging, but nothing a bit of experience can't solve. Whenever I'm applying decals, I like to add a gloss varnish underneath to really help make sure that the decal can get a good seal on top of the model. You want as flat and shiny a surface as possible. I cut out the decal I wanted, and one thing I find helpful, particularly on Games Workshop decals, is to cut away all of the decal that I don't need. I took a ruler and carefully cut away everything except the decal. These strips look to be the perfect size to go on top of my Tombstalker's copper stripes. I trimmed them down so I had just what I needed. And the best way I have found to hydrate my decals is to set them on the sponge of my wet palette, or in my case a paper towel, and let it soak up the water. It should only take about 30 seconds to get fully hydrated, and the second you can feel the decal slipping and sliding on top of the paper, it's ready to apply. I coated the area with some micro-sol decal medium, and I let the decal stick itself to the model and then pulled away the paper. I had a few seconds to poke it into place and then left it alone to dry. I actually find applying decals very satisfying. It takes some work, but it also looks great, and it doesn't take that long either. Decals are challenging, but I would advise anyone to give it a shot. You'll probably mess up frequently like I did, but after a few dozen or a few hundred, you'll become a natural. Eventually, you will become a decal surgeon and be able to get those decals right where you want them. The only thing left is to slather on a few more coats of gloss varnish. What this is gonna do is it's gonna break up that plasticky edge, that super flat plasticky edge of the decal. I usually keep applying layers until I just cannot spot the edge of the decal anymore. GW should do a plastic kit of these. They need to bring them back. The paint job might be done, but I'm not quite done yet. The next step is rebuilding. Wow, that kicked off a lot of debris. The next step is gonna be fixing up their bases. The first thing to do is gonna be removing the grass tufts from before, but I'm gonna be applying all the new stuff just right on top of the old bases. I wanna add a little extra height, so come on now. There. Does not wanna let go. Whew. That's probably as clean as it's gonna get. I wanted to try out using tinfoil to make some elevations, and it seemed to work great. I tried gluing it down with some super glue, which did not work. Then I switched to tacky glue, which also did not work. This was a learning experience. I smashed it into shape with everything around me. Remember, every tool can be a hammer. The tinfoil is amazing stuff. I'm really liking how it's building up some simple shapes really easily, and it's incredibly light, but I'm not thinking the tacky glue or super glue is going to be the thing that sticks it down. I also think I'm just gonna have an easier time of it if I do remove the old base completely. I think hot glue is actually gonna be the thing to use, which is crazy. I don't use hot glue for a lot of wargaming projects, but sometimes it is the absolute best thing for the job. I am so happy with how the tinfoil looks, but I think it still needs a little something, and that something is birch bark. Birch bark works wonders to be scale rock and like stone. It's really good for making nice natural elevations. I applied some bark with hot glue, making one raised part for each base. I love how organic this part of the process is. I just let my creativity flow and future me will bring it all together. Once I was happy with my bark, I took some more tinfoil and used it to blend my old tinfoil hills into the birch bark rocks. One of my favorite methods for quickly filling in some spots on the base is kitty litter, super glue, baking soda. So I've got this giant rock that's got a lot of surface area in the front. So I just pour on some kitty litter. Now, you want to use fresh kitty litter, but used will work in a pinch. And I just drip on some super glue. And the super glue, just like cat pee, will bond the kitty litter together, and it'll create a nice hard shell. And boom, just like that, I have filled in that huge space in front of the rock. And if you want it to dry a little bit faster, you can sprinkle on some baking soda, which is an activator for the cyanoacrylite super glue, and will help it to dry pretty much instantaneously. Now it's time to apply some sand. I started by coating my bases with a layer of wood glue. So for applying sand, I always like to work heaviest to lightest in terms of grit. So I'm gonna put on a few flakes of slate, and then I'm gonna go to my medium pebbles, and then I'm gonna go to my fine-grained sand. And so now that I've applied my bigger parts, I can now fill everything up with the fine-grained sand. With my bases dry and looking pretty slick, it is time to paint them. And you know what? I don't think I need a primer. I won't tell if you don't, but I'm just gonna give them a coat of some Vallejo dark sand like I do all of my Necron bases. Is a primer important? Sure. Is it gonna matter? I don't think so. Once about 2 coats of this have dried and there's a nice varnish on top, I think it'll all be fine. It took about 2 thin coats to get my bases looking properly yellow. Then it was time to apply some weathering pigments. I really like how this red pigment changes the look of my yellow earth and gives it a natural yet otherworldly finish. I spread it down thickly in the recesses and kept it off of the raised areas, giving a mottled yellow-red look. My Necrons are right at home on this orange alien world. Getting right down to the end, I'm gonna paint the rim of the base, and I'm not painting it black, but I'm gonna paint it gray. Anybody who thinks that you have to paint the edge of the base black can fight me. I get that the idea of the black base rim is like, well, we've all picked black as the color that we ignore. It doesn't break immersion for our little plastic toy soldiers that we play with. Honestly, the basing that works perfectly in every situation is clear bases. So, but not very many people are a big fan of clear bases. And to take any base from good to great, it needs some grass tufts. I think grass tufts are the perfect way to add some nice pizzazz to an otherwise maybe bland or just less interesting base. I find that at least with gamer grass, the self-adhesion is pretty good, but if you find that they're not quite sticking, a drop of super glue works great. And if you find that a tuft is too big, you can just go ahead and chop it in half or in thirds or in quarters with your hobby knife and spread it out evenly across the base. If you're someone who doesn't love basing, I would say grass tufts are your ticket to awesome bases with no effort. I love tufts, and the more the merrier. My orange alien planet is looking much more lively with a bunch of foliage. And that's not an earth bush, that's an alien bush. Finally, it was time to glue down my models. I applied a nice drop of super glue to each leg. I don't know if this is the best solution, but it is certainly a solution. With my stalkers super glued onto the base, we'll see how good that super glue holds up to time. It seems like it's on there pretty good now, but I might need to insert some sort of a rod up into the body. But it's time to apply a nice coat of matte varnish and call these fellas done. These guys look fantastic, bigger than spiders and leggier than wraiths. I'm gonna call them the twins. And I hope to get them in many, many games of 40k. Their rules are okay. For 90 points, you get a 9 wound monster with 4 to 8 shots of strength 5, AP-1, and 6 punches of strength 7, AP-2. They could do some moderate damage with their weapon skill ballistic skill 4, but wait, weapon skill ballistic skill 4? No way. No way. Harumph. Yes, even though they are one of the biggest and strongest of the Canoptech arachnid constructs, they are just as clumsy, only landing attacks 50% of the time. But so what? I didn't buy these guys because they were competitive. I bought them because they are sweet, and there's no denying them that. So what if a lowly Necron warrior is a better swordsman? These guys are massive monsters, and I'm sure they will strike fear into the hearts of my opponents. I am so happy to have my flagship Forge World models for my Necron army perfect. They had been languishing in mediocrity for so long, but now they look glorious alongside the rest of the Necron forces. They would make a great addition to any Necron list, but particularly I'm excited to field a Oops All Canoptech list for my Necrons. And they just look so glorious. My Necron army now has a wonderful centerpiece, and I can't wait to take it in many, many games of 40K. Well, that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching me resurrect some Forge World models as much as I loved doing it. Maybe it's time to go give one of your old models a little TLC. And with that said, now it's time for EOB Complete. We put out a challenge to our community to send us before and after photos of their recently finished models to be immortalized in our videos. If you want to join in the fun, you can submit a before and after photo of your painted mini to our Discord server, which you can find in the description below, or you can post it to Instagram with the hashtag EOBComplete. Without further ado, let's look at and get inspired by what the folks have finished this week. Some Flesh Terrors by Will Paints Things, a Dreadnought by Rick Painting Models, a Putrid Blight King by Kevin Muhammad, some Blood Bowl markers by The Watcher in the Dark 85, some B1 battle droids by Just Young AU, a Plague Terminator by Just Add Humans 40K Whip Diary, some Chaos Space Marines by Color Selassie, some Space Wolf Terminators by Lawrence Bostock, The Silent King by Dr. Deadman, a Terminator by Zilch Follower, some Phase 2 Clone Troopers by Wolfpack, a Necron Psychomancer by Marvelous Miniature Terrain, a Rebel Force Ghost by The Happy Heretic, a Castle by Orange, a Chaos Captain by Tiddy, a Primaris Hellblaster by Vega Wusky, a Poxwalker by Brugateloda, an Old School Chaos Warrior by Mommy Negan, a Night Lord Terminator by Argyrus, and a Kermit with a Chainsaw by Arnold DeGans. Congratulations to everyone for a job well done. It's no small feat to get paint on minis, and you all should feel really proud. Nothing gets the hobby juices flowing like finishing a project, and we thank you for sharing your work, motivating us and the hobby community to paint our plastic. Thanks for sharing.